Welcome to a new edition of the Neon Jazz interview series with Chicago jazz guitarist Jeff Swanson. He was born and raised in South Bend, Indiana. He's been in Chicago for some time now, and he's been featured at the Chicago Jazz Festival, Hyde Park Jazz Festival, Iowa City Jazz Festival, the Chicago Gospel Festival, and so many others. His latest album is the 2018 CD Case Filter with his octet, meshing jazz, improvisation, electronic, and post-rock together into one appealing sound. He is also featured in the New York, Chicago-based trio Whirlpool and maintains a private studio of students up there in Chicago. So please get to know him and dig this interview, my friends.
So, Jeff, thanks for reaching out to me on Jazz, man. I appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem. My pleasure to be a part of the show.
Right on. So let's go ahead and dive right in here and find out, are the Cubs going to win the World Series this year or not?
Are the Cubs going to even get to play today? It is a snowy opening day here in Chicago. That's the real question.
No! Don't say that. That's awful, man.
Yeah, man. I was pretty surprised waking up to about an inch of snow this morning. So hopefully they get to play.
I'm going to go ahead and dive right in here. Again, thanks for taking a minute out. And I want to talk to you about your latest album, Case Filter, with your octet. It's your first full release. It was recorded around this time last year during a residency at the Whistler. So talk to me about this album and how you constructed it.
Yeah, so originally the group started in that fall previously, so like around October of 2016 with a trio. And the idea was to take music that could kind of fit different shapes of, band sizes essentially. So we started off with that trio, and I wrote a bunch of music that would be able to morph during this residency from trio to, originally it was supposed to go trio, quintet, septet, nonet, but somebody had to back out. So it ended up being trio, quintet, sextet, and then an octet at the end. And basically just music that I am known as a jazz player, I guess, but at the same time I have a lot of loves for other musics from all over the world. And I wanted to be able to kind of include some of those different influences in this project, and I tried to pick players that I thought would really do a good job of being open to kind of experimenting with these different sounds for that particular residency. And I think it turned out pretty well.
You know, it seems to me as though a lot of albums, when jazz musicians get in the studio, because it is so expensive, it's pretty expeditious. It's within a few days, you lay everything down. But this album was over 4 weeks. Did it feel like you had extra time to do what you wanted to do?
Yeah, because each week I would get the playback from the night that we recorded, so I could listen back to it and kind of think about what happened and maybe how to approach things differently or keep things that I liked in there, So it was, honestly, that was one of the best things is having time, to really process and kind of develop that over the course of that month. And having Dave Zuchowski, the engineer on that project, was also invaluable just because the sounds that he was able to get for a live recording I thought were really impressive. Just the ability to kind of be able to go back and mix later and have that be able to blend different things and not just have it kind of sound like a cacophony of sound, because it's a fairly small space, the Whistler, so it's really a testament to him, the sounds that he was able to get on that. And as well, Anthony Cremino, the mixing engineer, did a wonderful job really kind of being able to bring out everybody.
Perfect. Talk to me about growing up in Chicago. How did you get so involved with music? Talk to me about your childhood.
Sure. So I'm actually originally from South Bend, Indiana, so not too far away. But I grew up there and was in classical guitar from like age 7-ish till about 13 is when I kind of started to delve off into electric guitar and different things. So I grew up there, not really in a musical family necessarily of like players, but everybody in my family really loves music, so they kind of imparted that very early on, more in like the kind of classic rock world though, to be honest, and like, soul and R&B and funk and that type of stuff. It wasn't really till like around that time when I got into high school that I met a few people that were into West Montgomery, and being an Indiana native, that was something that I immediately connected with. I was like, well, what's going on here? This is pretty amazing stuff happening on the guitar. So I think that was kind of a spark, definitely just peers in high school that kind of influenced me. And then from there, they kind of told me about this Berkeley guitar camp. I don't know if you're familiar with these like summer guitar camps that they do out there in Boston. But I was able to go to one of those and kind of get connected with some people out there. A guitarist named John Stoll, really amazing solo. He does a lot of solo guitar and duo projects and different things. He was one of the teachers, and he told me about Fareed Haq in Chicago. So initially, when I came back, I got in touch with Fareed, and the last 2 years of high school, I started to drive to Evanston from South Bend. It's kind of a trek, but we would do these super long lessons. They'd be like 3 hours. I'd go up there, we'd hang out. And that was really influential. And he was the one that eventually brought me to Illinois because he was the guitar professor at Northern Illinois University in DeKalb. And so I started there in 2006 and finished up in 2010. And most people, I would say, go from NIU to Chicago just because it's kind of an obvious choice. There's already a little bit of a network for you. And most people, when they're in school, they're going to the jam sessions in Chicago anyway, taking trips and stuff. So it was kind of the logical choice for me to just go from DeKalb to Chicago and try to make some stuff happen. And so far it's worked out. I've been here since 2010, and 8 years later it's still moving forward. So I'm liking it so far.
Chicago's such a great town,
Yeah.
And the jazz scene always seems to be rather consistent. And you do perform with a stronghold there. You perform with Whirlpool. Talk to me about being a part of that act.
Sure. Whirlpool was a really great project. That featured Charles Rumback and Caroline Davis. And the last record that we did was with the great Ron Miles. And that was really a special recording that we got to do out in Denver with him. We haven't been performing very much the last few years. We've been involved in, everybody has different projects at this point. But that was really unique for me because that was my first chance to play in a group that really, there's no bass, so it's like very heavy lifting for the rhythm section in terms of kind of creating a space. But in that same sense, it also taught me to be okay with that space. So I think for me, that was a very, very steep learning curve in that project. Also playing with those two musicians there, I was like the baby of that band, if you will. So it was great for me to develop and just kind of have to rise to the occasion of, performing with much more mature musicians at that point in my life. And compositionally, I would say that was also something that really kind of opened up my mind in terms of like, well, what do you have to have in a song, in the jazz context? Do you have to have a walking bass? Do you have to have these things? And it's like, well, no, not really. And I think a lot of us in that project originally kind of took a lot out of the Paul Motion Trio book, with Joe Lovano and Paul and Bill Frisell. That was really inspirational stuff that before that project, honestly, I hadn't really checked out as much, but I think that kind of opened my ears up to some different things as well. And definitely an invaluable experience.
So you talked about being classically trained in guitar, but on this album, there's so many influences that are going into this that are, electronic, improvisational, of course, jazz, post-rock. Are you trying to push the jazz envelope, or are all of these influences just a part of who you are and it's inescapable and that's what you do?
I think, honestly, that's kind of where I've arrived at. Those are things that they're just kind of part of who I am. And I think maybe by, just a byproduct of that is that it does maybe push what you could call jazz. But I think at this point I just want to be really honest with the music that I'm writing and not really try to formulate things too much, just really express whatever's genuine, And I guess all these different things that I like come out because of that.
So let me ask you this. You're a teacher as well, and I'm curious, based on all of the experiences that you've had up to this point with your teachers and performing, what do you try to give your students?
Well, I think the most important thing to give any student is an ability to appreciate the music, right? To listening. You'd be surprised how many younger kids just don't even listen to music and they're taking a, instrument. But beyond that, once we get past, everybody needs to listen to music and enjoy that part of it, kind of participate in this community of listeners, just how the instrument works, it's a confusing thing, the guitar. So if I can impart that on, just basically how it works and how to play it, and then allow those students to kind of pursue the music that they like, I think that's the best thing that I can do. And the best teachers that I have never told me, this is the way that I do it, you need to do it this way. It's more like, this is how the guitar works, this is how I do it. You don't have to do it this way. You should pursue things that you really love. And I think that's a really important thing as a teacher, to not really try to mold people in the same image as you necessarily, but to give them, their own strengths so that they can pursue the things that they're into.
Absolutely. Another part that's very essential, not only to a student, but to a musician, is the live performances that you see and the impressions those make. Talk to me about jazz performances you've seen live that have really made an impact on you.
Oh, man. Countless performances. I'm trying to think of recent things that I've seen. So one recent thing that's really fresh in my mind, the pianist Tigran Hamasyan was in town, and that's something that I thought was pretty amazing. He does more solo things these days, and just seeing this person who has all this technical facility but also kind of this melodic sense, I think that was something that really struck me, is that balance between, technical prowess and just kind of getting to the heart of a song, within all these amazing talents. Beyond that, I'm trying to think of some other things that have really sparked some, influence in my life. Definitely, I would say seeing Tony Malaby came and did a residency, I think it was about 1.5 years, 2 years ago at Elastic Arts, and he brought a bunch of music for this large ensemble, which maybe in some way kind of influenced a little bit of this project. But the Elastic, I don't know if you're familiar with Elastic Arts. It's another venue in Chicago. Yeah, so they've been doing this thing called the Exposure Series the last few years, which is really great. They bring in different visiting artists. And that year was Tony Malaby. So he came and did workshops. So we got to hang during the day, and then I got to see him perform. And the idea is that somebody comes in and then they play with a bunch of Chicago musicians. So it was also cool to see all these people that I know from in town, and respect, performing with them. I think that I'm not going to be able to remember everybody, but my friend Charles Rumbeck, he was playing drums in that particular show. Paul Gialorenzo, I think, was on piano. Josh Berman, I think, was playing trumpet. Maybe Jason Adashevitz was playing vibraphone. A lot of really great Chicago kind of, not necessarily totally free jazz people, but kind of more in that scene.
So let me ask you this. If the Jazz DeLorean pulled up in front of your house and you could go anywhere in the history of jazz and see anybody, where are you going? What digits and what location are you going to?
Probably every guitar player would want to go back and see Wes, right? I mean, that's an easy one, I think, for me to pick, is just be able to go back to maybe those early stages of the organ trio stuff that he was doing in Indianapolis, and maybe some of the quintet stuff too that he was doing down there. I think that would be really amazing to see. And just, he seemed like such a warm person too, and I think that would be really inspiring. Just from the stories that you hear of George Benson and Pat Martino talking about him, it's just like, that's somebody that you would really, I feel like, want to connect with if you had the opportunity.
Why do you love jazz?
Well, it creates a community, I think, that you don't get in every style of music. There's an openness, and an acceptance and kind of just this ability to really be yourself as opposed to fulfill a role, and let's say you're in a rock band, you're the bass player playing the songs, as opposed to maybe in jazz, it's more expressive, and it's more of a give and take as opposed to just fulfilling that role, So I think that's a big part of it. Also, just the fact that under that world of jazz, you can get into so many different things, like we've been talking about. It doesn't mean that you have to do that one thing only. You can kind of use it as a vehicle to explore all these other different types of music and meet all sorts of different types of people. I think that's probably my favorite thing about it.
You've just released your first album, and you're clearly very busy and very involved not only with teaching but with performing. What's the future look like for you? What do you want to see happen as time goes along?
As time goes along, I think a couple things immediately that I would like to see happen would be, I'd like to do another record with this particular project. But the next one I think will be a studio-based project, hopefully with kind of a little more time than a day or two to take care of it. But we'll see how that goes. And just being able to travel more and play and kind of take this music around, I think, is an immediate thing that's on my mind. It's like a very special band to me. All the people that are in it, they're great players and great people, and I love hanging out with them all. So just creating more opportunities for, me and the guys to get out there and kind of show this music off for a little bit. And then do it again, and hopefully a couple more times after that.
Very cool. So everyone has a version of you, your family, your friends, those that you teach, those that consume your music. But who do you think you are?
Who do I, man, that's a heavy question. I think I'm a person who is very much reserved in a lot of ways, but at the same time, I'm not, honestly, you stumped me, Joe, I gotta say. I don't think of myself only as a guitar player, you know? I think of myself as a human being and a friend and a person who loves art and all these different things, but yeah, I guess I don't know how to answer your question, to be quite honest. A musician, I guess, is one thing that I am, but I guess we're all many things, like you said, to many different people. At this point, I guess I'm just a guy trying to get out there and play, make some friends, and see some places.
That's cool. That's an answer. That's a great answer right there. Jeff, thanks for reaching out. Man, I appreciate it. I appreciate the music, and, you know, good luck on opening day today. Hopefully you guys can get it in up there.
Yeah, we'll see what happens here. Thanks so much, Joe.
Thanks for listening and tuning in to yet another Neon Jazz interview, where we give you a bit of insight into the finest players in Chicago, Kansas City, and spots all over the world, giving fans all that jazz. And thanks to Jeff for his his music, and his stories. If you want to hear more interviews, go to Famous Interviews with Joe Domino on the iTunes Store. Visit Neon Jazz at youtube.com, and for everything Neon Jazz, go to the neonjazz.blogspot.com. Until next time, enjoy the jazz, my friends.
Neon Jazz.